Welcome, Perennial Pride listeners. Thanks, as always, for joining me. I really appreciate you as audience members and always trying to look to provide some value to you in some shape, inspiration, hopefully a funny story here and there, and certainly help with helping you build your financial acumen and intelligence and helping you live a life of purpose and certainly freedom, especially related to your finances. So, today as I'm recording this, we're heading into spring. Hopefully, thankfully, I'm not a big winter guy myself personally, so the changeover to the new season is always exciting for me as I get warmer outside and outside more with my dogs and just being outside. So really excited. And more recently, I'm coming across a lot more people who are experiencing so much change in life, for good or bad, and reminds me of a saying I usually, say to myself in the morning is to embrace impermanence, because life will change before you know it. And it's inevitable, and it's something that is fun too, or if it's a journey of life that change is going to happen, and it's just how we adapt to it. Do we drive the change ourselves? How do we handle it? And, it's uncomfortable for most people, me included. And change is always something that can bring on significant stress and confusion and uncertainty. And so today I wanted to just cover some things that certainly have helped me and I've seen in others on how they traverse change in a positive way, right? Because, when we think about in the normal scenarios of life, that I think it's said that 95% of what we do on a daily basis is just kind of a routine, a habit, whether good or bad. And there's maybe some changes in there are subtly different, but every day is kind of like Groundhog Day to some degree. And I think one of the fun parts of life is that it does change, and it will change whether you want to or not. So how do we produce some significant change proactively if we can? I've come across a lot of people where it's forced upon them. And if, at the time of this recording, there's a lot going on, certainly with our government and the changes as it's being evaluated in terms of efficiency. But, sometimes it's thrust upon us. But if we can, how do we get ahead of it and plan for ourselves to do it in the most efficient and effective way? And so today I'm going to cover some different sort of things you can be doing or thinking about along the way. And they're not all about finances. Certainly there's an aspect that we'll cover parts of it that relate to kind of doing something around your finances to prepare. But even as I was trying to leave my W-2 position years and years ago, financially I was fine, but there's a whole host of other things in my head and in terms of being prepared that were causing challenges to leave. So I know people go through this in different ways. So just wanted to share my tidbits on what I have found to be helpful to deal with change, and in a lot of cases sort of drive it for your benefit as you make a change and embrace it and hopefully enjoy it to some degree. So the first area I'd like to cover really focuses internally. We get so much influence around external things in our lives, and especially with the world of social media and news, and everything's so externally sort of pressured on us, and it may impact us in a lot of ways. But when we're thinking about change, and I think it's important to recognize internally how we feel about it, right? If we're making a big change, moving from a job to a new business, and understanding why does any of this matter to you? How does it impact you personally? And because we can get so easily wrapped in like I said, a routine, that we often don't really think about what we're doing and the purpose of it. And I know there's a lot of people who've gone through that, especially when we think about the pandemic and kind of the changes and sort of mortality sort of strike that took a lot of people. Is that now we're faced with our mortality and kind of what's our purpose in life. So really prompted me, and I did this years and years ago, to even just do an assessment to kind of what I truly value in life, and kind of what do I want to make as my own more purpose and cause in what I do every day. Because, at least most people I come across, that they want to have some level of meaning and purpose, that they're doing something impactful in this world. And frankly, there's times when we can forget about that because we get into a routine and dealing with the stresses of life and just trying to get through each day, we forget about that. Like, why are we doing these things? I mean, unfortunately, as far as I know, we only have one life, but we sometimes can live it like we have multiple lives. And so we don't get to doing some of the things that actually mean something to us and how we want to leave our families and others and how we've impacted them. And so really, any change you're going through, I think is really good time to reflect on kind of who you are and why you're doing these things, because the change can be difficult. So you have to kind of get connected on that. Why is this change important? And what do I hope to obtain from it, and what it means to you in your life? And it's a really good time to do it. We often don't do it, and I know I didn't. And I think it's important because you turn around and years and decades fly by, and you kind of may not even recognize why you're doing certain things. So this is probably a good time to reset and really think deeply about it, and think about kind of your own why and what you're trying to achieve and what you'd like to impact in this world. The second area, and I think we innately know these things, but again, we often can get into a rhythm. We're not thinking about these things, but what's that term? We're perfectly imperfect. But I do believe we're all so unique, obviously in our skills, our personalities and such, which is good to understand and know about ourselves. And, we always kind of think of the negative side, like here are the things I can't do or things that bug me about myself. But I think this is really about understanding what makes you so unique, right? I recently did a disc profile again, which I used to do in the corporate world and kind of forgot about it, but got reintroduced to it. And it reminded me, to really embrace and be comfortable, not just comfortable, but to love what is unique about myself and how I operate. It's uniquely how I do things and what I'm great at and what gives me some juice in life. And to really make sure that you're crystal clear on what that looks like for you and how you operate and what gives you energy and life, and really be able to say, well, how can I use that for something positive to add value somewhere in a business or into a new job or a position, and say, this is how I'm coming at it from my own lens and from what I know is unique about me and what I can bring to the table, and see where that takes you. Where could you fit into a new role or even start a new business, right? And where can you apply it? And we all have different experiences that we've grown up with childhood and different jobs in our lives and things that have impacted us negatively or positively. It's all important to recognize and appreciate more than anything. And I think as I've grown older, I appreciate those things. I'm definitely more compassionate to others because of it, because I don't know where people have come from or what they've experienced. But, reflecting on your own world and your own uniqueness and what it is you can deliver and bring to others is really, I think, a key aspect of trying to go through change, right? Because especially if you're going to start it, like I said, start a business, right? Where would that be? What would you be doing? Like, what are you uniquely designed to be able to do, right? And obviously it's a starting point. It isn't, there's going to be a lot more to learn with it, but at least it gives you a lens of something that, hey, maybe there's an interest, a passion in there, or a cause that just, to you just burns in you. Like you hate that happens in this world. And it's something you might be able to impact and put your sort of energy and expertise and sort of drive behind it. So it's really important because, just like anything with change, it's easy to do and it's easy not to do. And I think these sorts of kind of front end, the whys and sort of what sort of can bring you energy on a daily basis, I really think helps you to get past when times suck. Because, certainly change is never easy, but, as you transition to new positions, new jobs, new businesses, et cetera, or expanding business, it's going to be a time of sucking. It's not going to feel great and stressful, but recognizing why you're doing it and, and how you're using your energy and talents to it, I think will help allow you to push you forward and kind of persevere through it. The third area is, it may be seemingly obvious, but getting educated, whatever area you're getting into or role or business or even getting into maybe a new investment type, getting fully educated or at least starting to get educated about is really key. I think about it as my kids are, at school age and one's in college, and now being immersed in different areas of education and recognizing that education is a lifelong pursuit. And, I've kind of come to grips with that there's so much I don't know that I'm just eager to learn. And it's one of my personal passions. And so anything you're getting into, new areas and such, to really get curious and kind of come at it as a beginner, right? It's hard to do because we may be growing up and having our expertise in different areas and skills and really prominent in our fields or jobs. And now trying to take a beginner mindset is difficult, but I think it's a humbling type of experience and it will keep you curious. And I certainly love it more than ever to learn more. And I'm just humbled by all that I do not know. I think that part of the pie that if you can envision it, the pie of things that I know, things that I know I don't know, and then the things that I don't even know I don't know. And I think when I watch Jeopardy, I kind of recognized all the areas I don't know about. But, the education part is huge, and it's really, there's so many ways to get at it. And this is obviously one way, podcast, but certainly reading books and goes YouTube, you name it, books, there's just so many things. So, but making sure you get educated is key, and sort of, what I call paying off the ignorance tax for not knowing. So we just got to continue to build our education and let it compound over time. This was a tricky one. The next one for me is, taking action. And, I'm one of those types where I like to analyze things. I'm a deeper thinker, and, it's a pro in that case because you're trying to get things right. You're analyzing things, but what is the negative side, which could be a negative side, is you never do anything about it. You just keep on studying, you keep on researching, you keep on analyzing, and you get into that world of just never doing anything. And, days, years, decades may pass. And, I had that for a little bit in my own life, but, it's something that easily can happen. So I would encourage you to, obviously getting educated and doing those other steps, but, to start taking even small steps, small actions to sort of move the ball forward and recognize that, you're going to fail. You're going to hopefully not be embarrassed, but you might get put in some, situations that are certainly not comfortable. But I think just like anything is to build that up over time. The more you do it, the more confidence you build, the more you learn. As long as you're going through it in that mindset, I think it becomes almost like a enjoyable experience because you're not going to be an expert in these things, and you're using you're either going to win or you're going to learn. And I think that's just a tremendous mindset to have around taking steps with the idea that you're going to learn from it and you're going to get better each and every time you put yourself out there, and to try to not be embarrassed or offended or whatever anyone says or does. You're doing it with the purpose that you're trying to gain mastery and learn what it is, whether you're starting a business or getting into a new venture. So what's that? Instead of just ready, aim, fire, it's ready, fire, and then aim, and adjust along the way. And I've had to certainly personally had to build that up over from my own self to be comfortable with that and realize that's part of the journey, and to sort of just recognize how it fits into the bigger picture long term, and maintaining a beginner and curious mindset, which frankly, I just find fun. And, we put so much stress on ourselves that we have to be perfect. We have to know everything. It's just a recipe for disaster and anxiety, and it will keep you thinking small. I know it has for me and others. So, as you're kind of venturing down this path and seeing more, I think you'll build more confidence in it and recognize that, these are just steps along the way. And the more failures you can sort of rack up, and you can learn from them, you're just going to accelerate your learning and progress and be much farther along down the road. And you may not see it on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis, but if you look back over a year or two, or be amazed at where you've come from and what you've achieved if you just kind of can persist through that and take steps and action steps, even if you're not ready. The next one I found to be hugely beneficial. I can like to be myself for the most part, introverted, but I've come to realize the importance of surrounding yourself with the right types of people who you one are inspired by, or maybe ahead of where you are, wherever you're making this massive change in your life, being around others who have traversed it and gone through it, so you can learn from them. Obviously, it shouldn't just be a take type thing, but what is it that you can do to help them? Maybe they have areas that you might be able to help them, given your expertise in of other areas or people and network with. But really trying to surround yourself with like-minded people who have that same growth and sort of aspirations in life. I think those things are not only energizing to be around, but really keeps you motivated. And I think a lot of people who are successful recognize they didn't do it themselves either. They had other people that are driving them to success and help them along the way. And so, I've seen it many times, people just stepping back, looking down, holding out their hand and say, I'll help you too, because someone else helped me and I'm paying it forward by helping you. And I think that's a tremendous, to me, I've always think of that visual, because it's just, to me, a society I want to be a part of, right? Where we're all kind of helping each other grow and build and, lifting all the tides, all those sayings that I think make for a much better environment and society, as opposed to, I got to beat you down, and it's scarcity minded. It's mine, not yours. And it's just the way things have been, taught to us. That's the way you win. Well, I think there's another way. And to me, it's being mindful of how do we treat each other respectfully and help each other, even if we are in competition with each other in some respect. But we still can respect each other and honor each other. And I heard the other day, I read in a one book called Inner Excellence, to respect your opponent, because they're pushing you to even be better. So those are, I think, more positive approaches. But, again, being around those people who are just driven, because if you're around people who are just kind of coasting and staying in, the easy, comfortable lane, it's going to be tough, right? You won't be as motivated to change or do anything, because you kind of fall into that same sort of normal path. So being around others who are also striving for what you're striving for is so important. And it kind of keeps you going and gives you a little juice when, days can be down, but it's always, I think, a positive boost, and being around them is important. And you may, over time, graduate to new people over your journey, right? Depending on where you are, but, finding those peers or friends and mentors and such are going to be hugely important. Now, obviously, if you're making change from going from working or starting a new business, getting your financial house in order, I think, is key. And you may have a lot of good parts, depending on where you are in your life, but it's always good to take an assessment of it if you haven't looked at it in a while, to ensure that the foundational pieces are solid. And a lot of them are very basic in terms of, having cash flow awareness, right? What's coming in versus going out? What is your kind of monthly sort of baseline nut that you need to cover to ensure that, your family and your children, whatever, is being covered without any massive stress, right? Because that's really key to be able to, obviously survive and, take care of the basics in life, necessities in life as these transitions occur, and knowing where those dollars are coming from, right? So having that sort of line of sight is really going to be key. And that obviously includes having ample savings and access to liquidity, right? This is a problem with, some accounts like, deferred accounts and such that, to access it requires paying a penalty. And so just knowing you have access, and if you can prepare for this, even better, to start stashing stuff away before you make the leap. But if you don't have time, to sort of evaluate where you could get some liquidity if needed. So that's really important. The other aspect of that part of it is the protection side, right? we can often neglect because, there's so much emphasis on where you're storing money and where you're investing. That's what gets most of the highlights. But, in terms of risk, especially if you're in a mode of building and growing, there are hiccups that can happen. Like obviously no one expected something like a pandemic to happen, but, what if something happens to your health, you get disabled, God forbid you die, like what happens to the rest of your remaining family, as as that, if that happens. And so getting a pulse check on all those things that can prevent you from being able to move forward, it's important to evaluate, do you have the ample coverages in place and have access to things that, you can de-risk so that you can hyper focus on your new venture and growing and not having to worry about those sorts of things. You're covered. And yeah, will they cost some money? For sure. But you can take a little money to cover large risks. Imagine you couldn't sort of, go to work and produce because you're disabled. Like, how is it possible that you're going to ever get into this new venture and build wealth and create income, et cetera? Basically, it'll be very difficult. And so it's really important to get that side of the fence sort of evaluate and ensure that you've got the coverages for health, disability, all that kind of stuff covered. Obviously, you want to ensure that any aspect of bad debt is sort of addressed. If you have large credit card bills or things that are just like seeping and grabbing costs from your financial life, they become leaky buckets of money that's siphoned to other people, then you want to try to make sure you get that addressed as soon as possible. Reduce interest rates where you can, maybe open up accounts to be able to pay for home equity lines of credit, et cetera. Like things that can maybe reduce debt as much as you can so that you have more sort of comfort and that doesn't become a problem down the road. Because especially if you're starting a new business, new area, like, it takes time to grow, right? It's maybe not going to be profitable immediately. And so understanding you got to build some runway in, and how are you going to supply that and then be conservative that it might take longer than you actually imagined it could. And so building that in and not being pressured by all the debt that may be basically consuming a lot of excess cash. And you see it now, especially as what's happening in today's interest world. A lot of folks are being damaged by it, right? Large credit card debts and, interest rates that are rising. These things could be very damaging. So getting that in order as much as possible is really another area to really be mindful of and address as much as possible. And the last thing I would say here is that, similar nature of having liquidity and savings and planning for that, although there are, just like anything else as a resource, credit, having access to lines of credit, any sorts of credit available is key, because you may need to tap into those things like a home equity line or things to make ends meet in emergencies and such. So having those areas open and available is important, because if something does hit the fan, that's the last time they're going to offer that credit to you. So doing it before you actually need it is important, right? It's, getting the umbrella ready before it starts raining, right? If it's raining, you're not going to be able to get an umbrella. And so that's why you have to plan ahead of these things as you sort of go into these changes, so you have ample lines and sort of resources to be able to stave off any disruption or, difficulty for you to get ramped up in, your new business, right? You have other resources you can tap to be able to handle whatever comes, and you're prepared for it, right? That's the last thing we want to do, is be in a position where, these things could happen. We know about it, but we didn't prepare for it. And it's really important to take the time to do that. So those are some basics around the finances. Certainly there's more, but I think that's a good starting point to get into. And then the investment side is kind of up for grabs, because I think, those other areas are more important as you're making these substantial, changes in life. And, it's something where in some cases your investment should be paused until some of these foundational pieces get addressed first. So the last thing I would share on this that's a little bit lighter is, we can often, it's so easy for us to focus on negative things. It's just a natural state of affairs. That's why the news is 90+% negative. It's what draws people in. It's where our brains go. naturally we want to solve problems. We see things as negative, and we can almost forget all the good things that are going on, even if they're overwhelmed by negative things. The good things get basically squashed, and it's something that I would highly encourage you to try to bake in. I know it's kind of something that you hear often, is to kind of express some gratitude almost you may need it multiple times a day, but at least daily, to reflect on some of the simpler things in life that you can be grateful for, even if it's the breeze that sort of cools you off or the sunshine beaming in your face. And, these are simple things that, you can be grateful for, and we can easily take advantage of, take for granted for. And, I would highly encourage it. It certainly helped me stay upbeat and positive, especially when you've had a crappy day or things aren't going my way. I know I have so many things to be grateful for in this world, whether it be family or friends or, just clean water you can drink on a daily basis. These are things that unfortunately a lot of people in this world do not have that. And so it's important to be grateful for those things as you are going through change, going through stressful times, to remind yourself that, there are good things in life, and there's things that are actually matter and things that don't matter. And, to remember those things in the midst of all the chaos and stress of going through change. So that's just small little sort of mental, emotional exercise you can do to really help keep you going, keep you positive and moving forward. So wherever you are, whatever time of transition you're going through, hopefully these sort of things are pieces of advice will be helpful for you and help you sort of manage the change for good, because I think this is where growth comes. This is where maturity, and just in helping you grow to what you always were meant to be and would like to do and become. And, it's all sort of a positive, but we all know it comes with potential stress and failures and such. So hopefully these are ways that you can prepare as much as possible and gut through it, and then get to where you want to get to and continue to strive. So thanks for joining me as always. And certainly we'll see you on the next episode of the Perennial Pride Podcast. Thanks for joining me on this episode today. I really am grateful for you as listeners to the Perennial Pride Podcast. I hope you're getting some tremendous value out of it and hopefully pushing you along your journey to financial freedom. I put this podcast together really to help you get more educated around your finances so that you feel empowered to live the life that you really want. And if you like the content that you heard today or watched, then I would encourage you to go to my website, perennialpride.com. There's tons of other content there. And you can access my book, Wealth Beyond the Numbers. You can buy it there on my website. It's a aggregation of a lot of great tips and tools I've learned to not only build my wealth in my accounts, but build wealth in my life and abundance and joy, and something that has a lot of my experiences in the journey that I've been on personally. Hopefully that can be also of value to you as you sort of move forward. So thanks again for being a Perennial Pride listener, and we'll see you on the next episode.